I think, oh, do we have big ideas?
Yeah, I
I mean,
got
I
a
know you
few.
always have big ideas, but like relative to the show.
All right, on the theology corner tip, I think that I've made this point on popping collars before, but one of the things that I appreciate about the show is that it deals I mean, it's a comedy, so you have to realize that there are comedic aspects to the show and how they tell the
Sure.
story. But it also does, I think, a fair job of taking seriously the sexual lives of teenagers, right?
Yeah.
Um, and it really started getting my mind sort of thinking around this idea that, you know, sex feels so vitally important to teenagers because their sexual drives are just off the charts, right? Same way that like rock and roll feels very vital to like teenagers because they're trying to establish who they are and what their taste is and stuff like that. So like music, TV, popular art, fashion, like all of these things that you kind of ascribe to feel very vital when you're a young person. And I think religion is really something that lives in the space of young people. I was thinking of like, is there a single religious system, like thriving religious system? There may be some new religious movements that this falls under, but um it seems as if, like, when you think about Buddhism, when you think about Christianity, when you think about Judaism, you're thinking about systems that were created and propagated by young people who were zealots for that particular way of thinking and believing.
Hmm.
The Buddha was a young man. Jesus was a young man, you know. Abraham was an old man, but Jacob was a young man.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
all of these things are like, like sometimes in order for things to thrive, you need passion. And it feels like the world of religion, sex, drugs, rock and roll, all of that stuff requires passion, and passion is in the world of young people, you know.
But how to explain Mick Jagger?
I
Are
mean,
they
Mick
are
Jagger
they
was a young person when he started,
Yeah, but
It's
he's still rocking. Like I love what you're saying because but then I think about all the people who are like who are now spiritual but not religious. So there's some component that sticks with you,
mm-hmm.
right? Whether that's traumatic or positive, right? And uh but yeah, I saw your note. I kind of chuckled. It's a young man's game. Religion is a young man's game or a young woman's game. Young
Right.
person's game. Yeah. So yeah. I think for me the big ideas were, of course I want to echo what you said, taking seriously sexuality because we all of our friends now have teenagers and we joke about their their life, their changes and their, what we assume they're getting up to. Um but I do like the inclusion of religion at the end. Some people won't, but I feel like it felt like very natural to Eric's character that yeah, that community would be religious and it would look like that. It would have that flavor of kind of the Pentecostal, more conservative, and
Mhm.
that's going to be a problem for him. But I love the fact that he was so torn. It wasn't like this community was uh, being overly negative to him,
Mhm.
right? There's a deep love for him from folks in that community. In the pastor, even though he may not agree or understand or relate to his issue, like his sexuality and working through that and discovering who he is as a person, but like that kind of tension felt very real and welcome when it often is so caricatured, um and dumbed down.
Mhm.
And yeah, I don't really have an idea behind that other than just gratitude for the way it was handled and presented in the show. And it's one that I've said to many people, like, you need to watch this because it's going to make you uncomfortable, but it's
Mhm.
also going to make you laugh about that discomfort. And I don't know, anything that can kind of help people think in different ways or kind of expand their, open their minds or experiences to different ways of being and talking about issues that are often kind of, black or white here in America, I think is really helpful.
Well, and I think that that's the key word, which you just said, which is openness, right? And the
Yeah.
reason that the reason that I was like, oh, religion is a young person's game is because for the most part, young people are open to possibility, whereas the older you get, the more calcified you become in your beliefs, in your ideas, in your practices, and the more you're more likely to dictate to other people what their ideas and their beliefs and their practices should be, right?
And you say
Which
you
is
say
where
you
we
feel like
find a
that's
lot of institutional religions now. It's like a bunch of old people telling young people what to do.
mm,
Um, and that's
which
that's
also
kind
feels
of
like our
yeah.
it also feels like our political parties too.
Yeah, and what I would argue is that that actually violates what the text is saying and what the theology of all of these institutions seem to be, which is
Yeah.
like, no, stay open, stay curious about the world around you, right? See God at work in what's happening. Don't start to create rules for yourself so that you define who God is. Let God be whatever God wants to be, right? Um,
I'm finding one quick quote. I want to you may want to edit this brief pause in, but I wanted to read a quote that I think a lot about, and I think it may be relative to this show because of, especially for people who may be more moderate or conservative in their, so and kind of their social and their worldviews, and certainly in their theology. But Jonathan Sacks, a friend of mine, posted this quote from Jonathan Sacks. The test of faith is whether I can make space for difference. Can I recognize God's image in someone who is not in my image, whose language, faith, ideal are different from mine? If I cannot, then I have made God in my image instead of allowing him to make me in his.
yeah.
So there's obviously some problematic language there and gendered notions of God or whatever. But I think the idea there is, how can we apply that to this show? And I think for a lot of people that'd be a really radical move to
Mm-hmm.
say, can I find God in this bisexual teenage character? Can I find God in this gay teenage character? And I feel like the show makes space for that.
Mm-hmm.
And not in I don't get the sense that anybody behind the show is overtly religious, although it would have been great to interview somebody about that final season, because it does seem like there may be some lived experience there. But certainly the integrity with which they treat, and the care with which they treat their characters, it feels like this very sacred, a bit more sacred than the description of the show might lead you to believe, right? Like teenage sex clinic. Uh, I feel like even every character is given, even supporting characters are given they feel whole and real and cared for. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense, but anyway, that's
Well, and I would also say that it's to the show's credit that it takes diversity very seriously too. So, and then that's across the board. So it's not just gay kids and straight kids. They have
Mhm.
asexual kids, bisexual kids, transgender kids. Like, it's got all of the letters,
Kids that live in
when we roll
wheelchairs,
out the
kids
letters,
that,
right, are all
yeah,
sort of represented in a thoughtful way and not in sort of like a token way. And then of course, like ethnic diversity.
yeah,
There's all different kinds of human bodies in this series, and I think that that's important
yeah.
to point out.
And that's a big idea. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's just baked into the series. Yeah.